how did you start coming up with the idea of having like family culture? I love that idea because we think about company culture, you know,
Hmm.
and it's been recently in the past years that I've kind of started uh, similar concept, is not the way that you put it. What started kind of triggering that within you?
Well, I started to realize that we were on, my family, my husband and I were on in this path that we were on because of the culture we'd grown up with. We were told all our lives that things would just kind of work out, that things would piece together as we just lived our lives and tried to do the right things. And and so we kind of got into this mindset of just like coasting. Um, because I learned that every family has a culture, but most of us have a culture by default. It's just what we grew up with. It's what our parents did, our grandparents did, and we don't learn that we can change that or that we can do things intentionally. You know, there's this. I read The Secret Garden with my kids, and there's this part in the book where she'd grown up in India with somebody who was dressing her, Mary Pike and Cherry. She was always being dressed. She never dressed herself. But then when her parents died and she moved to England, she expected the maid to dress her. And she said, well, why would you think that? And she just, I don't know. The nannies always said it was just the custom. It was just the custom. So a lot of times we don't question our customs. We don't question those things that we're just ingrained in us to do until something happens and we realize that doesn't work. We can't continue to exist that way. And so the first was that we could coast through life was our culture, our customs growing up, that if we just check off the right boxes of school, job, family, all these things that culturally are acceptable things, then we would be happy. The second thing that we grew up in, is this shame culture or fear-driven culture that we are always being driven by the pressure to perform or the fear of failure. And those things are going to always lead us and drive us to depression and anxiety because they're fear-driven. And what I began to realize and to learn was that staying on this course that we were told would always lead to quote unquote success was fear driven. Because if we wanted to deviate and try something different that was against the status quo, it was scary. And we were always told that would be risky, But I started studying things into like entrepreneurship and, studying homeschooling and things like that are against kind of what's normal in our culture. And I started realizing that the things that we think of as normal is really what's toxic, because we're caught in this trap of a shame cycle and a fear cycle that if we wanted to break away from what's normal, then you're going to be alone, or you're going to be, you're not going to succeed. You're going to be in poverty, or your kids are going to be unsocialized and weird and on all these things. Like there's all this stigma around quitting your job before you're ready, or there's all this stigma around having your kids home to be homeschooled. And it's all fear driven. It's all fear based. But what I came to realize and value more than fear, because when we base our decisions off of fear, then we're always just gonna be running away from our fears. If you ever watch like a horror movie where they're running and running and running and they're always looking over their shoulder, and then they run straight into the bad guy, right? Because they were never looking ahead, And so we're driven by anxiety and fear, and that just leads to all kinds of negative things. But when we have a plan looking going forward, or there's something that we're reaching towards, like in the comment that I posted on Facebook earlier, I think you liked it, about somebody who's their child is being bullied at school. And a lot of the comments were just pull her out of school and get her away from the bully situation. But my belief is that it's more important to figure out what direction you want to go towards rather than the thing you're trying to avoid. Because avoidance is going to produce different results than being intentionally going towards a goal. And so that's something that I have really strongly started to value is this, that whatever our incentives are, if they're fear driven, then you're going towards failure. You're not going to ever thrive. But if they're trust driven, if they're faith driven, in the sense of, even though it's scary or difficult and I don't know what the end result's going to be, if I'm going towards something that I anticipate, then I will always succeed, because I will always have a growth mindset. I'll always be working towards something rather than just reacting to something that I'm afraid of. Because that's the other thing. Reactivity isn't going to produce the same kind of results as being proactive, you know? And so that's when, my family, that's what we've always tried to implement with our family, and with the choices that we made to, quit our job and sell our house and move in with my parents. We looked at all of the opportunities and results that we wanted from that decision, rather than just trying to get away from the things that we were afraid of. So that was, just the things that we are working towards is what's more important than what we're trying to avoid.